Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and sorry for getting new videos up today out so late. There'll be more, but you got plenty yesterday, so it's not like there's any shortage of long videos for people. But I came across a really interesting study that I want to talk about with you guys for just a little while, so let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, do a little bit of crafting, and let's talk about this. Okay, I'm going to try to do some cliff notes for you guys. For those who don't really like the long videos. Long story short, I linked the study down below. We need to do a lot more research on this, but the short of it, carbs are better than fat post-workout. If you're concerned with replenishing muscle glycogen recovery and even enhancing your gains, normally, like I say, immediate post-workout meals aren't a big deal. A lot of that's myth based upon research on fasted research. But if you're going to eat anything post-workout, carbs are clearly superior to fat. And in fact, eating fat at all in large amounts post-workout, even in place of nothing, might actually reduce your gains. It's pretty interesting. So, for those who want a little more detail, a lot going on here. Normally I tell people, post-workout nutrition has been overhyped as far as the immediate post-workout by the supplement industry. Most of the data they have, the data that's out there, showing benefits of certain things post-workout is fasted. People are completely fasted. As long as you get enough carbs in and enough protein in the next few hours after you train, even from whole foods, doesn't need to be fast absorbing stuff, you're generally going to be okay. You're going to be fine. It's going to help with everything that you need. Muscle restructuring, glycogen replenishment, recovery. The only people who need to really seriously worry about post-workout timing are generally going to be athletes. Let's just not say people, let's call it what it is. Athletes who train multiple times a day. Particularly people who are mixing long bouts of cardio with weightlifting in the same days. Those people, meal timing becomes real important. For people who train once a day for 30 minutes or an hour, it's largely irrelevant. It's not a big deal. This, however, was interesting because what it showed is that when they showed a group that ate a lot of carbs post-workout versus groups that ate a lot of fat post-workout, obviously the carbs group is going to have better results in terms of glycogen replenishment because simply put, carbs are pretty much glycogen. Fat, your body can restructure some of it with the glycerol backing into glucose and then glycogen, but we're talking about at most 10 or 11% of the calories you consume from fat, and it takes hours and hours for this process to take place. It's a very slow process, so most of it's ended up happening while you're sleeping and stuff. So the glycogen replenishment's a given. That's an obvious. What was interesting, though, was the muscle remodeling as a result of training. What most of you guys think of as gains. Let's just call it what it is, gains. Muscle tissue remodels itself from any type of training. Doesn't matter whether it's a marathon run, a hypertrophy session in the gym, or a max power session in the gym. Doesn't matter. There is muscle tissue remodeling that happens as an adaptation to training. The fat actually seemed to blunt it. Few theories going on here. We don't fully understand that. That doesn't make a lot of sense because it's still energy, right? You're still getting an energy. Fat calories can be used for recovery, because your body has an energy source to tap into to burn everything else, and it can then put the protein and some of the other stuff you eat to use as far as muscle tissue remodeling. However, the high-fat meals seem to actually blunt the body's remodeling response. And that's pretty interesting because that's different. We're not expecting that to happen because normally you're like, well, you consume some fat. That means some of the glucose you already have stored, glucose you have stored in your liver, the protein in the fat meal is all available, right? You should be able to use it for tissue remodeling. Shouldn't be a problem, but it blunted it. And again, it doesn't make sense at first. So that needs to be studied a lot further. Now, if I want to speculate here, I'm going to speculate. I'm going to go out on a limb as to what I think is actually happening. All right, we already know one of the problems with post-workout meals and post-workout nutrition is that absorption is slowed down. Right after you train, for the next hour or two, sometimes blood flow is reduced to your digestive system. Your body is sending blood to your muscle tissue. It's sending blood to important places that are really critical. It slows down digestion in general. So this idea of fast absorbing carbs, there's no such thing post-workout. You're not spiking your insulin. You're not absorbing anything fast. You're absorbing everything slow because your body is sending less blood flow to your intestines, your stomach, everything else. Well, something to consider there is that fat is the slowest digesting and absorbing thing you can possibly consume. So what I think is happening, if you're consuming a bunch of fat post-workout, your GI tract is already slow. What also happens then is that your body has to utilize extra blood flow to your GI tract to help process that fat, to get blood flow to your stomach so that it can contract and work all that fat to try to get some gastric emptying going. That is possibly reducing blood flow to your intestines then. Same thing, once that fat is then hitting your intestines, normally a lot of your post-workout recovery is going to come from the carbs and things that you ate before you trained, right? Most people who understand this stuff know that. Well, what happens then if you're getting some gastric emptying happening and that fat is then mixing in with the carbs in your GI tract? You already have slower absorption, slower digestion as a result of training. All of that fat being put in there is going to grind all of that absorption to a halt. So if you're absorbing all of the carbs and protein that you ate pre-workout and any of the protein that you ate post-workout, because of all that fat in your GI tract, what happens? You're going to see less of that protein and glucose making it to your muscle cells. Well, if that happens, that makes sense, particularly those proteins, that those amino acids are being absorbed way slower, even the ones you ate earlier in the day as a result of that. If you're absorbing amino acids slower and throughout the rest of the day because that fat slows it all down, you have a very, very limited window where your body is going to grow new muscle tissue, where it's going to make adaptations. It can't repair any of the micro tears as easily without new proteins coming in, new amino acids. So you're reducing the flow of amino acids to that muscle tissue. If that happens, you're going to repair the trauma slower. You're going to remodel the muscle tissue slower. So that really, really large fat meal, what it ends up doing is just slowing everything down. And again, this is just my hypothesis. I could be wrong, but it could explain what we're seeing in the lab study. So if everything is slowed down post-workout for hours because of that high fat meal, that might be slowed down 6, 7, 8 hours. You're definitely going to reduce recovery. You're going to reduce gains. You're going to reduce adaptation from training. This is not a good thing. The only way this works would be, if you were consuming this around the clock instead of a big meal post-workout. What I mean is, people on like ketogenic diets, for example, well, some of them do okay with their weight training and everything. It doesn't seem to hurt their gains, but they're also consuming protein and fat around the clock. These people still have protein that they're digesting that they ate last night, the next day when they train and after they train. They're in a little different of a situation potentially due to their overall diet, but we definitely know that big meal post-workout of fat blunted response. And again, I think it's just due to slowing down the absorption of amino acids particularly, so it could blunt the overall protein remodeling inside the muscle tissue. So that's really not an ideal scenario. So what's our take-home message here? Not only that, as I've been saying before, that pre-workout nutrition is probably more important than post-workout nutrition, but making really bad choices post-workout, like again, eating a mostly fat meal, could be a really bad idea. It could be a problem, and in this case, it appears to be. Now, do we know how much of a problem it's going to be in the long term? No, we don't. What we really need to do is take some studies to where we look at this for several months, muscle biopsies, DEXA scans, things like that, to see how much of a difference it makes. Are we talking a 5% loss of gains, or are we talking about a 30% loss of gains, or a 50% loss of gains? We don't know. We really need some longitudinal studies to really get a better look at this, but the initial data we have here is what most people have probably been noting for many years. Many coaches consuming a lot of fat post-workout, probably not the best of ideas. If anything, carbohydrates are really the most important thing to be consuming over the next few hours after you train. Carbohydrates first, protein second, proteins being a distant second. Carbohydrates, though, really seem to be important post-workout, and large amounts of fat, probably not a good idea. It could potentially, at least based upon this data that we're seeing here, hurt your gains and progress, and not just weightlifting, but even endurance and cardio related. So remember, guys, after you train, The data is showing more and more here. Carbohydrates are king for post-workout nutrition. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.